Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Snap Judgments presented by Buyers Auto. I'm Jeremy Birmingham. That is my good friend Andrew Ellis. This is an Ohio State recruiting version of Snap Judgments. The Buckeyes stay hot, land commitment number 21 in the class of 2025 as four-star defensive end, defensive line prospect Trajan Odom from Matthews, North Carolina. Weddington High School has just announced his decision to pick Ohio State over USC, Oregon, and others. And Andrew, this one, you know, when we talked on Talking Stuff earlier this week, there was a lot of buzz about Maxwell Roy, and that has not dissipated. And I think both of us were guilty of making assumptions and saying, well, Ohio State probably won't go after both of them. And here we are, and it looks like the Buckeyes are on the verge of landing commitments from both Trajan Odom and Maxwell Roy. But today it's Trajan Odom, the four-star from North Carolina. First thoughts.
My first thoughts are you're correct. We were both guilty of assuming. I think it was we were under the impression it was going to be one of those guys, and then you shoot for Jakeem Stewart, Malik Autry. And then I kind of went and looked at the scholarship situation. They only took one defensive tackle last cycle. So, I mean, maybe it makes sense to take three guys this class. And it seems like that's what they're gunning to do right now. I think he's a good player. He's a three technique. He's different from a guy like Malik Autry, who's that big one tech, enormous human being in the middle there. A lot of guys wanted him, or a lot of schools wanted him. Oregon visited USC. It seemed like this one kind of went back and forth for a while. And then the buzz kind of headed towards Ohio State middle of this week. And now here we are. And Larry Johnson has one heck of a defensive line group shaping up with, I guess, maybe 2 to 3 more potential pieces out there.
Yeah, and reality is Ohio State does want 3 defensive tackles in this class, and I think that there was a thought that maybe if you get Maxwell Roy or Trajan Odom, then you swing for the fences with both Malik Autry and hoping that Jakeem Stewart reclassifies and you swing for the fences there. But the reality is that's taking 2 pretty big cuts, man. Like if we are all fully aware of Ohio State's history recruiting out of Louisiana, it is not easy. The Buckeyes have signed 1 player from the state of Alabama since the 1981. Right now they have 2 players committed from Alabama. The idea or the odds of them signing a third is very low, no matter how much Malik Autry likes Ohio State. Like between now and signing day, this feels to me like a bird in the hand, or a bird in, what's that saying go? A bird in the bush is worth 2 in the hand, or a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. That's what it is. Like,
yeah, you're right.
That's how this feels. And what you get out of Trajan Odom is a player who, I've seen him listed anywhere from like 245 to 285. And he is a legitimate 3 tech at 6'4", 200, and let's just call it 275. If you watch the film, like he's really quick. He's a guy who's got a good first step. I don't know exactly about the level of competition he's played. And that's what we talked about on Talking Stuff this week, is if you had to choose one or the other, I probably would have gone with Maxwell Roy despite the ACL injury because of the level of competition, because of the program at St. Joe's Prep. But again, the Buckeyes didn't have to go one or the other, and now it looks like they're on the verge of getting both. Odom is the number 300 ranked player in the On3 industry rankings, so that's combining everyone's rankings. He's the number 24 ranked defensive lineman, number 8 player in North Carolina. He's originally from the West Coast, and I think that's why a lot of people made a presumption that USC or Oregon, especially considering the way that those 2 teams are when it comes to NIL, would be the teams to beat here. But ultimately, in talking to Trajan, it came down to Larry Johnson and Ryan Day, and Ryan Day's plan for Ohio State. And Trajan Odom has bought fully into the idea that we are just now seeing this new, fully formed iteration of Ryan Day, and he seems to have big plans for the future, and Trajan Odom wants to be a part of it. But when you look at this class, Andrew, now you've got 3 defensive end commitments. Ostensibly was the year Mathis, Zion, Grady, and London Merritt. Now you have your first defensive tackle with Maxwell Roy on the cusp, maybe of joining the class as well. Do you feel comfortable with that as a fan, as you look at it? Like, or we talked earlier this week. Sometimes it seems like a lot of these guys outside of Autry and Jakeem Stewart are all pretty much the same in a lot of ways. Do you feel that way?
I mean, I view them sort of similarly. Like you said, Maxwell Roy does face, better competition, that kind of thing. But they need the bodies. They need the depth moving forward. And especially as you said earlier, Malik Autry and Jakeem Stewart, you can't just kind of count those guys in pencil or anything like that. I would say the way I would categorize both of those now are somewhat long shots. I know Malik Autry made comments about wanting to make a final decision in the coming weeks. I kind of doubt that's going to happen, as we got a long way to go until mid-December to that early signing period. But I'm good with this. Honestly, if this is the path they go, they got Trajan Odom. If they add Maxwell Roy and then just, like you said, swing for the fences on one of those other two, I'm perfectly fine with that. I watched Odom's tape. I've seen him listed at 265 on Rivals, closer to 290 on other sites. But like you said, he's a 3 technique. He's the biggest guy on the field in all of his highlights. He's not facing Matter Day or anything like that in those clips. He seems quick, uses his hands a lot. I'm not going to pretend to be a defensive line expert, but that's what I saw. There was a clip at 90 seconds in the highlight where he got the most uncontested blocked punt I've ever seen in my life. He just kind of ran right there, blocked it. I think he recovered it for a touchdown too. But I'm totally fine with this approach. I'm sort of surprised we're here talking about them taking both of those guys, but I'm totally on board with it.
Well, that brings me to my next question, and I think this is actually part of the next discussion Ohio State's going to have, because of the long shot nature of Jakeem Stewart and the long shot nature of Malik Autry. When you have a player out there still like Marion Dye from Indiana, who I think is still pretty interested in Ohio State, and it seems like his recruitment has shifted a little bit. Now we're talking about like it's an Ohio State versus Purdue battle, and not Ohio State versus Tennessee or Michigan or anyone else. Is it in your mind? And I like to ask you these questions because I know you're the world's most, I'm going to call you a realistic, fan of Ohio State. I'm not going to say negative, but is it worth it to just still go hard, full court press after Marion Dye? And if you get Jakeem Stewart or Malik Autry at some point, then 4 is fine because one of those guys is a unicorn.
Yeah, I would say yes. I honestly forget about Marion Dye a lot. Like, just, I don't know. He's kind of slipped my mind of late. Like you said, it was Georgia, and then it was Michigan and Tennessee involved. And now I keep seeing Ohio State, Purdue, as you mentioned, which is a weird, I don't know if that's his final 2, but if it is, that's kind of a weird final 2. But if they want to keep going after him, I think that makes sense. He seemed, and again, we've talked about his weight too, different listings everywhere. But I mean, like I said, if you take a look at that scholarship chart, shout out to Dan Hope. I think he kind of manages the one over on 11 Warriors, but there's not a lot of names on there. You see guys like Tywan Malone that are going to be gone by then. And then, you got some unproven guys like the Caden McDonalds and that kind of thing. But they only took one last cycle in Eric Mensah, and it makes sense to load up this class. I thought it was going to be more of a load up on edge guys, but it's just going to be loading up on defensive line. So if they want to keep going after Marion Dye, yes, I'm good with that.
But again, and it's something we've talked about the last few years, for Larry Johnson, it is becoming somewhat of an amorphous position. Like, you look at a guy like this in Trajen Odom at 6'4", 275, 280 pounds. One of the reasons Ohio State likes him, one thing that you mentioned earlier, he does play with his hands very well. That's a staple of Larry Johnson's defensive lineman. And he is better than most of the kids are at his age in using his hands and not just using his size to bull rush people. But he also has played some outside. He plays inside. He can play, 5 technique. He can play a 3 tech. So he's a kid that has the options to move around. And, when you look at Trajan Odom, like, it doesn't look like he's put really any time into physically developing himself yet. I mean, and again, he's changed high schools once through his high school career. We don't know every circumstance that these kids have in their life, but I like to try and project out to what this kid's going to be as a 6'4", 305-pound defensive tackle when he gets to Ohio State, and actually is a part of a weight program that is going to be pushing him to places he's never been before. And that's really, why it's so hard sometimes in college football recruiting, because they are prospects. We are prospecting what they're going to be. It's not always about what they are right now. If you look at the national rankings for Trajan Odom, we've got On3 has him as the high. They have him ranked higher than anybody else. They have him as the number 13 defensive lineman. 247 has him as the number 45. ESPN has him at 35, and Rivals has him at 22. So opinions vary, But Larry Johnson and Lealon Clark have liked him from the start, and he's visited Ohio State 3 times. That first visit back in March really set the tone here. And Ohio State was his first official visit over the June 7th through 9 weekend. And he told me when it was over that it really did set the tone for what he wanted to see out of everyone else. And I guess maybe I didn't take him seriously because it sounded like, in conversation with Trajan at the time, he said, I could make a decision now, but I need to finish out these other visits. So maybe he was always leaning toward Ohio State, and the industry is just catching up because, again, people are trying to think about these things by reading tea leaves and thinking logically. And I don't know that thinking logically really matters anymore when it comes to recruiting. But what does matter is winning, and Ohio State over 2 Big Ten foes in USC and Oregon, which is,
weird to say,
weird to say, has commitment number 21. It's Trajen Odom. He is a 4-star defensive tackle from Weddington High School in Matthews, North Carolina. He is one of this is the 5th commitment in the last week for Ohio State. It has been a busy week. There are a couple busy weeks ahead, I think, and as Ohio State looks to sign maybe 28 to 29 guys in this class. So there's going to be a lot more stuff to come from myself and Andrew Ellis on the podcast. This has been Snap Judgments presented by Bowers Auto. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Have a great weekend.